Okay, so my name's Syed. Welcome to episode 2 of the Botcast. This episode we've got a huge amount of stuff to get through. Unfortunately, we don't have our regular co-host Michael or Chegg with us this week. Michael's in LA and Chegg's sleeping, which is a really poor excuse, but I think we'll have to let him off this time. Enough about them. Basically, we've got 3 awesome new hosts today. So we've got with us Bape Drop, we've got with us Qasim, and we've got North as well. I'll sort of give them a minute to each introduce themselves. If you want to start, Bape.
Yeah, so Bape Drop, I own Drop a Clock since July 7th of last year, coming up on our first year anniversary, as well as Project Destroyer PR and support team for about a year. So that's my background.
Qasim.
My name is Qasim. I run YouTube channels within the sneaker Twitter community. I've worked with Adept for nearly a year. I left recently. Currently just affiliated with Ping, and that's about it, really.
And finally, North.
What's going on, guys? North here, current mod of F3, as well as developing some capture tools.
Cool. So these are your hosts for this week. We've also been very kindly sponsored by Balko, who's offered us a discount code for BalkoGen. I'm not exactly sure what the percentage will be at the moment. Will be something like 30 or 40% off. So the best way to look for that is to look in the description of the YouTube video uploaded, or to see one of our tweets at the podcast. Okay, let's get started. So I think obviously the elephant in the room of this week's episode is the whole Wick situation, which has been going on. As you guys know, Wick was on the show last week. He decided to step down amidst everything that was sort of kicking off. We got a lot of different sort of inputs from different people. I think it sort of started with Nick, aka Watched Batch, from Express, and then Michael sort of added a little bit, and then Rektoff made his statement, and then obviously finally Balko made his point in the end. I mean, we've all got sort of affiliations, which
Yeah.
we discussed earlier with the situation. What are sort of your opinions on how the whole situation went down, and where do you guys sort of stand on it?
Well, I'm the least related to this whole drama because I haven't really worked with any of the people involved, but I kind of have. I can see both sides of the argument, which is one thing not a lot of people can actually do at the moment because most people are just jumping on the bandwagon of hating Falcon and Wick. But I think Wick's in a unique situation because he's affiliated to one of the top, arguably the top bots in the game. So obviously he has a standing to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like there must be some lies within the entire thing because obviously at the end of the day it's Twitter. Obviously everything can be taken out of context.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh.
one of the biggest concerns, especially from sort of the Wick standpoint, is that a lot of things were sort of exaggerated or sort of just allegations without any hard evidence. Not to say that Wick and Rektoff and whatnot are in the right, which I personally wouldn't agree with, and this is someone who's worked with Wick for like 6 months. I'm quite close to Wick. I speak to him regularly. We get on well, but at the same time, I know and he knows that mistakes are made, and these are sort of things that you can't do when you've got a position which he has. Obviously, the owner of Momentum now, since its launch about a month or two ago. Bape Drop obviously owns Drop a Clock. Just some history for our listeners. So, Wick and myself both joined Drop a Clock in October of 2018. Bape obviously owned it. Him and Cop co-owners, Cop Clock are co-owners of the group. We sort of just kept on working there. We sort of rose up the ranks, became moderators and whatnot. Then the PD thing kicked off, where basically Sneaky made a post in Botmart about Wick having like a previous alias, which was Jackal, and then he scammed for a PD copy or something along those lines. Following that, he was then kicked from Drop a Clock and I think F3 as well, was it?
Yeah. It actually goes further back than that. So even when he joined in October and into November, I would get direct messages on Instagram and on Discord of people saying, "Oh, Jackal." He went by Jackal back then. he's in your group, and a lot of stuff was being said about Funko Garage because he got banned from Funko Garage for attempting to scam people for Project Destroyer, I believe. And I got a bunch of messages of that, but it was no hard evidence. It was just people complaining. And the difficult thing with Wick, if any of you know Wick or have worked with him in the past, is that he's an incredibly hardworking person, and he's one of the few people in the community who you see working, day in, day out, always pushing out, new content and working for whatever project he's working for, whether it be Momentum or Balco or anything he's worked in the past. So we were put in a hard position because that's sort of when we were taking off this winter, and we could accredit a lot of our success to Wick. So then when you see people bashing him back and forth, and you see members like, oh, why is this guy in our group? There's evidence of him scamming for Project Destroyer. So as owners and as admins, it puts you in a hard position because he didn't scam anyone in our group, but of course he has a difficult past. So at that point, we had to make what we think was the responsible decision and remove him from the group, which was really difficult at the time. And it was really difficult for the months following after because he was, a core part of the group. But we now see that it was definitely the right choice to make, even with all these, 4 different Google Docs out, 80 pages of stuff to read through about conflicting arguments, like what did Wick do, like what did Rectoff do, what was his involvement, and it's just really hard to see the truth through all of this. So
yeah, I mean, you make an interesting point that you say he didn't necessarily do anything wrong and drop a clock. I mean, he ran slots for people, he never took anyone's credit card or whatever. There was multiple opportunities for him to scam if he wanted to. But he hadn't done so. But then that sort of begs a question that Balco's now in the same position, where Wick's obviously developed a negative reputation, but Balco's stance on this is that he's got a very limited role in BalkoBot. He doesn't have access to keys. He doesn't have access to anything which could lead to anyone's information or like personal details being compromised or even being able to scam anyone. So why should Balko remove someone who's so hardworking, who's only been beneficial for him, and then sort of make them leave over something that's sort of nothing to do with him?
Yeah, I agree. I think people get it really mixed up that he has access to keys, which is just not the case, which isn't the case for most people who work PR for bots. Like I would know, I don't have access to Project Destroyer keys, I'm sure.
Mod for F3 right now, we don't get any access to a client's keys at all.
Yeah, so it's you.
I was, personally from working with a couple of bots, with a legal binded bot regulating around legal laws in the UK. Basically, most bots, obviously the structure, you have PR, you have designers, all stuff like that. From my experience, the percentage owners of the bot, most of them have access to keys. After that, I don't think anyone does, except from the keys you get paid in.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that breaches some point of the contract where it says that obviously if you have access to keys, you can backdoor keys. And obviously you don't want that for a bot. So I doubt he did. I feel like that was just something to paint like a cherry on top, just to add fuel to the fire. Because I honestly don't think he did.
But that's the problem with a lot of the arguments we're seeing. Look, and I don't want to be put in a position where people are saying, oh, like, you're backing Wick because you're friends with him, you work with him in Balco, you work with him in Momentum. Like, yeah, I do all those things, but at the same time, I can sort of completely appreciate the situation. I understand that he's in the wrong, but I'm supporting Balco. I'm exactly the same role as Wick. We have exactly the same permissions and access, and I know for a fact he doesn't have any more access than I do. And the only thing I have access to, which anyone else doesn't, is the staff chat and the support tickets, which I promise you don't want access to because some of the shit you see in there is ridiculous. But but anyway, like that's the problem. And when you start getting allegations like that, which are far fetched and just frankly false, then you then sort of open your whole argument up to, is what's being said actually true? Because you see some arguments being said where they said Wick has access to this and that, and you'd sort of question the entire integrity of the document at that point, I think.
Yeah, I feel like people have lost his. I feel like people took his friendship with the higher ups at BalkoBot and used that as a way to say, okay, he has access to this, this, and this because he's friends with this person, and he's been here for this long. Because once you have one lie, once you can pinpoint one lie in someone's argument, the rest of it you begin to see like misconceptions. Like one of the points in one of the Google Docs, one of the early Google Docs, was that he was seen in a voice chat. But to be honest, like I'm in a voice chat in some groups, but I'm not exactly. I don't have a higher role. I'm just a member. Like being in a voice chat in a server in Discord doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But then once you say that, okay, he has access to keys and he has access to this, you saying that he's in a voice chat makes it seem like a huge thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like people, I kind of feel like people are being misled here a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it was pulling out of context. A bunch of there's 50 screenshots here, and a lot of it was taken out of context. As you see the document that Rektoff made, there's a whole part about false allegations where he disproves some of these screenshots, which just goes to show that we're just pulling together. There's thousands of people looking at these 50 different screenshots, and everyone's saying different things about them. Like his nickname was Rektoff's paycheck, so that must mean that he was paying to be a part of this, or he was funding it. But we don't know that. It's a lot of
that was something that was very much misrepresented, and I think it was just unfortunate because he's called Rektoff's paycheck because Rektoff does certain things in Momentum for Wick and for the Cook group. So I'm on Momentum, and I'm aware that Rektoff doesn't actually do that much for the group. So he makes Twitter monitors, he does other sort of low level sort of dev work. It's nothing extensive. He's not got monitor roles. You know what I mean? That's all go up and he doesn't have any sort of wild access that has been claimed to have. So he may have that in his own group. That's fine. I'm not, obviously his group isn't fine, but the fact that he's not doing this in Momentum is, it's unfair to then start tarnishing the Momentum and Balko name just because of that. Which I think Balko actually mentioned in his statement. He said, having said that, I think we can all agree that Wick shouldn't have been in that group, whatever it's called, Sanify, right? He shouldn't have been in that group. Why would you put yourself in that position? It's stupid. You're going somewhere. Wick, everyone knows about Wick now. It's been he gained 1,000 followers in a month or something. He's doing well for PR. He's been doing well for himself. He's made a group. He's going places. Why would you then go and join that group? And he knows that. I've spoken to him about it. He knows it was a mistake, and it is what it is. I think the concern at this point is how many mistakes can one person make, and how well can they be trusted?
That brings up the question of once a scammer, always a scammer. Because I remember back when I think Shifty posted it in Botmart, and he's like, if you want any more info on Wick, just direct message me, and you get put into this direct message of Wick.
Yep.
And they asked him all right, did you scam for this copy of PD? And he denied it. And then they showed proof, and he's like, yeah, that was me. I'm sorry. And you go see this, and we're talking amongst ourselves about what we should, the future of him and our group. And we're like, okay, so do we trust him, his character, to not do something like this again? And the general consensus, just knowing him as a really hard worker and generally a good person to talk to, a nice guy, we're like, yeah, he probably won't do something like this again. It seems like he's really learned his lesson. And then you go and see him do something like this and apologize again, and you just, how many more times is it going to happen? And then that raises the question of, is the Balko, how should he be held accountable for the actions of his PR members, and how accountable should he be for those?
Yeah, I completely agree. Just to clarify though, Bick didn't do PR for Balko, although he was probably the most active Balko staff on Twitter.
Right.
I think regardless, I completely understand though, why people might think so. Just because he's just so active on Twitter, he's always doing stuff related to Balko. His Twitter handle is Balko with an I instead of an L. It's just so many things. But I think we're quite fortunate in a way that North is actually in the chat with us, because obviously he was a Drop a Clock member at the time, just before Wick was dismissed. So if you're a member and you find out about this information, which I assume you did around the time, how do you sort of feel about having that person on the staff team, despite them being hard workers?
Yeah, absolutely. I was member around October, right around the time that Sneaky made the allegations that Wick had started to scam for those copies of PD. He would be running slots for members, and I don't know how I feel about him taking my credit card info as well as other members, especially knowing that he had done those PD scams as well as stuff that now we're just finding out and we may not know.
Yeah, I mean it's a very difficult position to be in, I think, and obviously Bape's been in that position. Obviously Shaba's been in that position. He North now works for, and you obviously dealt with it in similar ways, whereas Balko didn't. I think you then got to sort of ask if the way people are sort of presented on sort of Twitter and Discord and whatnot, if it's then fair to sort of bash them in the way that they've been bashed. And it's not just Wick that's been bashed, it's the other way as well. Like, people have said certain things about Sneaky from bottom art which are just inappropriate and just not right. And then, but it's also been the other way as well. Like, people have been like sending death threats and shit. Like, you know, how do you
Yeah.
guys feel about the situation, how it's unfolded?
Well,
I think that brings in the whole topic of just the sneaker community in general. I think there's a lot of people that are just way too toxic, and there's a lot of hate going around on places that they shouldn't be, especially regarding this Wick situation. We see hate coming from all different angles, a lot of different allegations, and I think we just need to talk about the sneaker community as a whole and become a lot nicer to each other.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I think it's just a difficulty of obviously being behind a screen and being behind a profile. Like, it's quite difficult sometimes to appreciate is actually another person behind that. And obviously we've got a lot of people who are, you know, some people are immature, like, naturally. But we generally do have some younger people in the community. And then, like, I think like Wick's like 16. I think Qasim's just said he's finished his GCSEs. But not to say obviously that you're immature, Qasim, but some people without sort of, I don't know how to describe it, sort of with less social experience might just feel that having a platform like Twitter or Discord to express their thoughts is sort of like their protection from the outer
I mean,
world.
that's what happens when you throw a bunch of 15 to 28-year-olds into an industry like that has a lot of money flowing around and a lot of communication able. You can really talk to anyone you want to. And when there's money going around and immature people combined with the youth, it's kind of expected that something like this is always going to be happening. You're not going to expect civil discourse when people can just hide behind a profile picture all they want. And the owner of Plugged put a tweet out, Mitch. He said, "So many people involved in sneaker Twitter hide behind fake profiles. Never understood it, to be honest. Even bot owners. Take personal responsibility of your brand and stand behind it. Own that shit, man." Which that's just like a great tweet. And you see the guys at Plugged never getting involved in beef or anything, and their bots like great on Supreme week in and week out, and you see them stepping back. And those guys, those are older guys who seem to understand, how to run a business better than most of the people in this community.
you gotta
Just like-
realize. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I was just going to bring up the topic of cyber as well as NSP. We see a lot of beef there, and I don't know how I feel about that. A lot of top.
You gotta realize that sneaker. Well, however direct it's gonna sound or how harsh it's gonna sound, the sneaker Twitter is literally just people that range from 15 to onwards that basically have a big ego in a way, right? Because I guarantee you, if I met someone from sneaker Twitter and I met them in real life, they're completely two different people.
Yeah.
Because on sneaker Twitter, I feel like if you don't have an ego, you're just going to be seen as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
You're not going to be seen as a person.
And also, it's difficult to sort of be relevant within the sort of resale sneaker community if you've got sort of mundane personality. I think that, but it's not just. I think this sort of opens up completely like new questions. It's sort of entering the whole scope of sort of social media and like influencers and stuff. Like, there isn't a single influencer with sort of a boring personality, is there?
No.
But at the same time, obviously, I think this is a community in which we're dealing with sort of big money. The way I sort of think of it is, it's sort of like all the kids who used to be in like trick shot clans in like 2012 and 2010 or whatever are now sort of just dealing with bots instead of clans, and it's sort of that's sort of how I think about it. And
because you got to
it reflects heavily like that.
Like, personally, when I got into botting a year ago, and this is like the first week I got into botting after watching like influencers like Ari Petru and stuff like that. That's how I got introduced into it. Like, I made like well, I know this isn't a flex, but I made like £250 in a week, for example, right? And I was like, this is £250. Like, to a 14-year-old,
yeah, that's huge.
£250, like
Fantastic.
that. Like, I used to do paper runs, you know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, I feel like if you're not mature and you haven't been raised and you don't have a mindset a certain way, you gaining that power can be dangerous. Like, obviously you see scammers every day, right? And a normal person with morals won't scam people because it's unethical, it's the wrong thing to do, and it's illegal at the end of the day. But I feel like once you throw kids into a community that haven't been taught how to compose themselves, I feel like that is bound to happen, and obviously it happens quite a lot.
Exactly, and it's just the idea of sort of making a quick buck, isn't it, and hoping to run away from it. But the reality is that despite the sort of whole community being unregulated, it is actually surprisingly sort of professional in a way. Like, you got sort of PR teams, you got people doing graphics, Like you got like bot PR is a really important thing. Like about the Balco thing, this is like a great example of it. But obviously, it's not an excuse for anyone to scam at all. Like the idea of making quick buck, although that's sort of what we do in the resale community a lot of the time, we certainly don't advocate it as a whole. But anyway, North mentioned this sort of cyber NSB beef, so that kicked off sort of last week, I think, mid last week, and that went on for a couple of days. And I think most people were just like, "What the hell? Where did this come from?" Was it NSB that started it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Lucas talking about checkouts, and then one of the people from NSB replied with a negative comment.
Cypher commented on NSB's the fact that they had way more checkouts, and then Lucas went on about how the user base was much bigger of NSB.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was completely unnecessary. I think they're both great bots. They're both good at different things, and I think both should be heavily respected. But I think the whole situation was so ridiculous. But I think in a way I was kind of grateful that the whole sort of Wick thing came into light, just because it's sort of just to shut those guys up, because it was just sort of being a bit stupid.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sorry, yeah, continue.
I feel like Lucas kind of like, because obviously Lucas prior to 4.0, Lucas wasn't the type of guy to like come out and just say stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you guys know, if someone said to you Lucas is in beef, you'd be like, oh, what? But I think because of 4.0 and how much hard work went into it, I feel like he had to defend himself and his brand, which is respectable, to be honest.
But he deserves to.
Yeah. I also think though that it's because they've obviously had some running history. NSB called out cyber before. I think it was in like January or something, and they've done a couple more after that. Like it was completely unnecessary. But I think the idea of NSB then coming back and being like, oh, this and that, and, you know, it's just not obviously not a professional thing to do. But when that question was asked of how many users do you have, when they asked him how many users do you have, and then obviously Syed was like, we have way less than you guys, and NSB were like, yeah, we have more, but it's because we're always in stock. Like I think that's a fair point. Like if you got more users, you're more likely to get more checkouts. So I think probably the better comparison would be percentage or ratio of like users to number of checkouts, rather than saying, yeah, we got 10,000 checkouts, whereas you guys got 4,000 or whatever.
Yeah. Because then obviously NSB is always in stock. So literally you could get one random kid that researches into YouTube, but gets the money together, buys the bot. So honestly, my opinion, I don't feel like them two are comparable. Just because of the fact that cyber's restocks are really hard to get, right? If you have cyber and you haven't flipped it for the money, you're really experienced. So the user base is automatically at the top of the chain.
Yeah, that's very true.
And to be honest, with NSB, if I was a kid and I had the money and I got into a Discord group and got a discount, I could start running with it. So I kind of feel like comparing the two is completely two ends of the spectrum.
That's very true.
I agree. I don't think Lucas even needed to take the bait there that Cypher kind of put out. Like Lucas is just on a different, like a wave of his own. Like he's created like clearly like one of the most dominant bot of all time, and it's still up there. And 4.0, like it was crazy. Like the way they put it out was great, and I hear that it's doing pretty well. And I just don't think, if I was in his situation, I wouldn't want to see him respond to that. I would want to see him not respond and just keep working and, you know, let his product like speak for itself. And that would make someone talking shit to Cyber just a whole lot better for Cyber, because, you know, they don't have to respond to that. But at the same time, it's difficult to not respond to criticism of your product.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you hustled so long and so much for it. I think it's an interesting point you said that it is the most dominant bot, and when you think of the resale community, one of the first things to think about is the influence of cyber and how it sort of completely changed the game. They not to say they did everything first, but they did most things right, and everything that they have works pretty well. Not so sure about Shopify since the changes that were made recently, but definitely like on Footlocker, on like Size and stuff, like it completely cooked. Like it's competing with bots like Ganesh, like Hawk, like Kaiser. Like Kaiser's very well this week. But yeah, I think Cyber's doing really well at the moment. Also, back to your point, Qasim, about sort of the user base. So I remember speaking, I can't remember who I was discussing with, but it is actually really interesting because you can have like 5,000 users or whatever, like, or maybe like 1,000 users or 2,000 users. But if you've got a bot which is of the lower price range, you're going to be having users of a more beginner level, if you know what I mean.
I agree.
Compared to, as you said, the cyber. Because if you're going to splash 4K, 3K in a bot, then you're going to want to know what you're doing, aren't you? You're not going to get into bots and just get cyber as your first bot. So I think once again, yeah, it's important, and I think Soul Developer, whoever it was, I think I feel a bit bad for them. Not so much recently because they've been doing quite well, but definitely from the period between like November and sort of March, April,
Yeah,
where
that was a
a terrible time for Soul. I think they like their resale dropped from like $800 to like $200. It was going for below retail. It was pretty much impossible to flip. People weren't running it. People who were running it were just completely washed. But at the same time, like Soul Developer was actually hitting some tasks like in that time period, and I think it's just because the user base just wasn't good enough for the bot.
Yeah, I think speaking on Soul, because I've had personal experience with the team and everything, the team are like honestly one of the best teams in the community, meaning that like literally all of them are active in chat, all of them are giving advice, guidance. Personally, I bought a Soul a while back for like $300. I ran it, and this was a period of time where it wasn't doing well. So I'm gonna be honest, I lost faith. I sold it, which is fair enough. But I've seen how it's came back recently, and it's interesting to see how the team handled that new type of respect, because obviously he went from being worth $200 to like $800.
Yeah.
So they did it in a good way, to be honest. They didn't gain an ego. They just continued pushing updates for the bot. And right now the bot is in a very, very good position. And I could easily say in like maybe a month or two, the resale will be easily over 1K. Because I could see that definitely happening.
That's what we also said in like November time, which is the only reason I don't particularly believe in Soul as I feel I did in sort of around that time in 2018. I did a lot of like bot market analysis at the time, and every day I was scraping data for Soul, and it was sort of stable. And then I remember like in the duration of like a week, it just plummeted like $600 or something, and from a start point of 800, that's a huge amount. But I think that sort of goes back to sort of market stability and stuff. So some things I found from when I was doing like work with bot analyst and whatnot was if the bot does well for a particular period of time and a particular number of drops, I think it was like 3 drops in a row or something, then you would typically find that the bot will stabilize at a particular price point. So even if it does badly after a few drops, so for example, Balko hasn't been doing as well as it has done previously at the moment, but its resale price is still very stable. Lifetime still around 2K. Renewals a bit more fluctuant, but that's expected. Like always, renewal prices are always more fluctuant than lifetime prices, but it's stable. Soul just never got to that point, I'm afraid, and I don't know if it will get to that point now, just because I don't know if enough people trust the product.
To be honest, they released quite a lot of copies the previous restock. I was in a call with some friends, and I got my bank account number wrong. And they to be honest, considering the amount of copies they released, I think it was over like 100 easily.
Right.
The market stabilized overnight, which I was really surprised about because I flipped it the same night. But I feel like people are putting a lot of faith in Soul, which at the moment you can't really say if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because it could work out or it could just plummet. So I kind of feel like time will tell exactly where that bot's gonna go.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bit of a shame. I think they got a bit. I think they get a bit unfortunate sometimes. I think Soul Developer has some really good ideas, but I just think that some other bots end up doing it a bit better, and that ends up overshadowing Soul Developer's sort of developments. So, for example, he pushed out the browser checkout, and then obviously loads of other bots took that. And then not necessarily. I don't want to say everyone went and copied him, but effectively he brought it in first, and then a lot of other bots then took the idea and then sort of implemented it into their own little way. But it's sort of things like that. Like I feel like Soul's actually done quite a lot for botting, similarly to how Eve did quite a lot for a lot of like UI stuff. But then obviously Eve's not doing too good at the moment. But yeah. Anywho. All right, so we should probably get back onto this list. I don't know why we skipped down to Cyber versus NSP when it was like 10th down. But anyway, it did link in quite nicely to the initial discussion about Wick. Okay, PD race renewal prices. What are you thinking?
I'll let you guys go first.
I can cover it as I'm closest to the situation probably. What I think a lot of people don't understand is that with a bot like PD with so many support members, multiple developers, a huge user base, it actually costs a lot of money to upkeep the work of the bot, paying the staff, paying the developers. And while I agree that 200 is a steep price, like even though I'm a little biased because I'm a PD support member, I think it's important to notice that and to recognize that it's really a necessity to keep up the success of the bot. And I do think that Project Destroyer gets a little too much flack for all these changes, and then it did shift down to 150 and Adidas is free, which people seem to enjoy. But those are just my 2 cents on the topic.
I definitely think the move to add Adidas to sort of the base product was definitely a good thing. I think it's good for PD. I think it's obviously they released 3.0, which initially was a bit underwhelming. It then started doing really well as of late. I think when Shopify started opening certain endpoints. But yeah, I think it's a good move as long as it works, which is difficult now. Like it once again, PD are a bit unfortunate as well. Like they obviously pushed like their 3.0 update, and only a couple months later, Shopify start ruining the whole system. And then Adidas, as soon as PD announced it, they stopped the whole cart hold system as well. So it's difficult. It's difficult. I think the whole situation with Adidas bots is quite difficult as well. Like obviously you got Akamai and going down the Akamai route or not going down the Akamai route, and then the cart hold system now. Like it's almost impossible to generate carts for members in your crit group. Like obviously Bape will know. In Drop a Clock it's difficult to do so. And then certain proxies are getting insta banned and whatnot. But yeah, it's a I think that's fair about the PD situation. Did I say I wrote link onto cyber raising renewal? That's not right.
Yeah, did they? No, didn't they raise it very slightly?
Well, they've raised the base price from £200 to £300.
To £300.
Okay.
Yeah. They didn't really announce it, but it was pretty subtle.
Yeah.
But I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I think that's
pretty justified. No one's really complaining.
Yeah. No, not really. Considering you can flip it for like
10 times that.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's really complaining. It's not. I don't think I. Oh, and I did mention it. EU bots. Okay, whatever. Offspring. Just pisses me off. I can't really be bothered to talk about it. It's just. Yeah, just read my tweets. And then the off-white drop of the Air Force Ones. So this was the shock drop which happened on the Off-White web store. It wasn't so much a shock drop. Everyone sort of expected it to happen, but obviously we just weren't sure of the time. Obviously Off-White with the way it's sort of run, it's just so difficult to bot. I don't think any bots actually do it. Like I don't think I've seen anyone actually bot Off-White in the last 6 months or something.
Yeah.
So what it is, it's effectively the best monitors you can get will dictate whether you cop or not. Also, they drop at ridiculous times. So anyone from the US will probably be asleep, and anyone from the EU will probably be at work. So yeah, basically the only way you can cop is if you're sat behind your computer literally all day. But I think a lot of EU groups had success. I think Source Monitor, Easy Cop did all right.
Express Notify did decent.
Yeah, Express. I think they had issues at the start, didn't they?
Initially, yeah.
Yeah, with the monitor not picking up. I'm in Express, so I was a bit disappointed about it, but it is what it is. Stuff happens, right? And it's still a good group, so I'm not going to bash him. What else? I think who else did good for Off-White? I think One Notify did all right. Is that right?
Yeah, I heard that as well.
Yeah, One Notify did.
I heard a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah.
To be fair, as a consumer, in a group, knowing how Off-White works, I wouldn't expect it to work. I wouldn't expect the monitors to work well, because if you got to think about it, the amount of precautions Off-White take now. When I hear about Off-White drops coming up, I'm just like, okay, if I really like the pair, I'll buy it for resale, because there's no way I'm getting it from Off-White.
Well,
my chances are stupid.
You get banned, man. Even going manual, you get banned. I got banned the other day, literally just for clicking on the link. It was just ridiculous. They're just so trigger happy with bans. Having said that, when you do cop I cop Menteds, I think 4 months ago or something, before I went away on my travels, and I've copped it through Express's monitor. But when you do cop from Off-White, it's very, very satisfying, because you just know that you've got 100 people trying for this one product, and it's all raw manual. There's no bot work involved, and it's just very satisfying. It's proper like old school copying, but yeah. Anywho, easy supply and demand concept and how Adidas market this to their advantage. Okay, so it's not so much something that's sort of there to be like debated, but it's just literally just the supply versus demand concept. So it's just I just find it interesting how so like Adidas will artificially limit the number of items that they drop. So for example, you know the initial stock numbers for like the blacks and the reflectives and whatnot, like they were so exaggerated at the start.
Yeah, that was at 180,000 I heard before the drop happened.
For the EU, well, UK, personally, my experience, it was like 60k, and it dropped like what, 3,600, 3,500,
It was out of stock instantly. Like compare the drop to this week's and Clear's drop, and I think that was over in like 5% of the time of this weekend. Like this weekend,
100%.
For a couple of hours, 3 hours, something.
Yeah.
Last
100% did.
Blacks literally went on for like 10 minutes, and the queue was stupidly long. Like it was so hard to get through. Bots didn't work. It was a nightmare. I think AMB did well for that.
Yeah, it did.
That one, didn't they? 'Cause they got a decent auto checkout. And then
All reliable.
Yeah, old reliable AMB.
RD Splash didn't perform too well, but apparently they're pushing a new update at the end of this month.
Oh,
That's
yeah, I've got RD Splash as well, and I actually used to use it for carts. I tried using it for carts this week, but unfortunately it didn't work.
My main problem was the cookies part. That was my main problem. Well, everything was working for me.
Yeah.
Most of the users' problems. The thing that annoys me is that most people that are blaming Adidas bots aren't actually looking at their own setup. Like I know Adidas is seen as one of the easier things prior to all this, but it's like a lot of proxy providers were just cut completely.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Like I'm not gonna name names, but a lot of them were like, I bought them and I was just like, what is this? Like a good 80% of my proxies didn't work. I was just like, nah.
I literally splashed like 50 quid and tried to run carts, and literally as soon as I ran the I put down 250 splash tasks for like 300 proxies. As soon as I clicked start, they were just getting banned within literally like 2-3 seconds. It was just horrendous. It was horrendous. There's this new sort of, obviously it's not new. I mean, it's been going around for a while, but it's not really been that used since bots sort of took over. But you got sort of different like browsers now which you can use, like browsers which if you create a new tab, like you can assign like different proxies to each tab and like different cookies, so you can sort of help yourself get through the queue. What are your sort of opinions on that?
Well, I built a program that does it because I was I did it in school just to test how it works. And I did it for this drop. I got 2 pairs doing it, but it wasn't. I think it's one of those methods that if you don't have a bot, you can use it well. But it's so hit or miss. Like it isn't one of those things that you can rely on. I feel like one time I set up like 60 of them. Obviously, I got some of them got banned, but I didn't get any. But I set up 7 this week and it worked well.
Yeah, I guess it's just luck of the draw in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially.
Also, bearing in mind, anti-stock was, I think, actually quite good. I mean, I got through on like 2. I think I got like 2 pairs from Adidas, but that was just through like 3 tabs or something on Chrome. But yeah. Let's see. So Dashi beef. Hold on. What happened there?
Does anyone know?
Dashi.
Which one? I did not hear about any Dashi beef.
I'm pretty sure it was the previous week.
It may have been the previous week. Yeah, because we didn't do last week's episode. So what was the Dashi beef from the week before that?
I think it was.
Was Hunter BDM? Was it like Soul? I think it was Soul, wasn't it? Soul developer, right?
It was Soul and Dashi because Soul Sorcerer had made a few allegations against Dashi about starting tasks, and once he put up the API, it started to work for Dashi. That was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think he also said something along the lines of, like, we did the idea first, like, why are you copying it? That kind of thing, right? But we've already sort of gone over that. I think having an idea doesn't mean it should exclusively be yours. Like, obviously, you came up with the idea, props to you, that's great. But at the end of the day, it's whoever does it better, and it's sort of, you can sort of compare it to Samsung and Apple or something. Like Samsung will release some tech or release a functionality update or whatever, and then like 2-3 years later, Apple will do the same thing, and then people will be like, oh yeah, but Android did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But I don't know. I think Apple just does it better, and that's just how it is. If the consumer likes it, that's all that matters, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird that people go into it calling out people for copying features. To be honest, if you look at the bots that have been here since the beginning, like if you look at webhooks within bots, every single bot has that. But then you can't just go back to the beginning and be like the original creator and be like, oh, you copied me, you copied me. I feel like bots copy each other all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So
That's effectively what it is. Like all Shopify bots all have huge amounts of similarities, even to the way they're run. It's just little things which actually differentiate them.
yeah, 100%.
Okay, so what's next? AWS changes. Okay, so some more beef. Why not? So we've obviously got the Trick beef, which sort of started kicking off yesterday. I think Josh, who was admin of Trick, left day before yesterday.
Decided to leave. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't particularly know much about the situation. I left. I sort of sold my Trick copy a few months ago. But I don't know if you guys know any more about the situation.
I know a decent amount, just from what's been told on Twitter.
Okay.
Apparently, two members of Trick weren't getting paid, so they obviously made the typical "I am calling out Trick AIO on Twitter," and apparently the owner was like silent. He didn't say anything, and then he banned them from the server, which is obviously pretty sus if you've owed money. And then he replied back on Twitter saying that they didn't do anything in the server, and apparently they removed support members' roles and spammed announcements. And there's a couple of screenshots of that as well. So kind of feel like
you can't expect to do that and then be like, you got to pay me now, even after I just fucked up your server. That's just not something you can do. It's just that brings back to like the childish thing that we were talking about. Like that's just poor etiquette. You can't expect to. That's not a proper give and take, and it's unfortunate. But I haven't seen people like super worked up about this Trick thing. So I'm assuming that those support members weren't vital members of the team.
I mean, no one really backed them up from what I saw. I think everyone was pretty much sort of aligned with the dev. I think it's funny, isn't it? I think everyone was sort of like, they're just stupid. Like, I think the way they dealt with it was so poor that no one can really argue for them. Like if they'd been kicked and they hadn't done anything wrong, and they were like, look, we worked for you, you told us you would pay us initially. Like, where's our money? And the dev just hadn't replied to them. Like, yeah, fair enough, they've got a point, but just the way they acted, it honestly just changes the whole scenario, and it's unfortunate, but they sort of brought it upon themselves, I suppose.
Yeah,
I agree.
Tricks had really good. If I can just quickly, I think Tricks had really good PR just from like day one. They always used to do the thing like our most active followers like will send you a direct message to you can buy a copy backdoor. Like that was just like a great. You don't see a ton of bots doing that, and I guess because it's technically backdooring copies, but it gets some great engagement. Yeah. And Trick's it's been like a pretty consistent Supreme bot past couple seasons. So kind of sad to see Josh leave that team, but
the call out post itself was pretty dead, to be honest. He got one retweet and he had like 4 comments.
It was so underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was kind of dead. Like I saw it on my timeline, I was like, all right then.
Shoot.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It was literally like, did you guys even see that? Honestly, like, I think most people don't even care. Like, it's probably not even worth mentioning in podcast, but
I think I think when most people think of Trick beef this week, they think about when Josh left.
Yeah, that's probably
most important.
Okay, so Steve Emoji messaged me on Twitter, sort of announcing, not sort of announcing, but sort of dropped a bit of info that Peachy AIO is dropping, which is quite exciting. Obviously, Curtie's been not quiet, but I think he's sort of just letting things run. I think if something's not broken, then why change it, right? So he's just letting things go, sort of just running Peachy. Peachy AIO is interesting. I have no idea who's deving it, who's doing anything about it.
It's a 17-year-old kid, I think.
Oh wow, okay.
I heard he tweeted something about that, but I take it it's not a bot. It's more like a tool, like a toolbox essentially.
Oh okay. Okay.
It's not. I know it's not a bot. I'm pretty sure Curdy clarified that, but I think it's like an all-in-one kind of like just to make your life easier.
Proxies and stuff, right?
Yeah, stuff like that.
I think that's cool. I think it's cool having that. I like the idea of cook groups having exclusive stuff. I think it's a really cool feature, and I think Peachy are doing good adding that.
I think he used it for the Yeezy Black release because I remember him saying that. Oh, shout out to Peachy. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't know if it was a joke or not, but yeah, I think it gives value to certain code groups if you have a branded thing. Yeah, because like
hugely.
obviously, yeah, I was considering joining PG the other day when they restocked. Didn't get a chance, but
they're just doing everything right now.
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of the most morally correct groups.
Yeah, it's just somewhere. It's somewhere that you want to be a part of the group.
Yeah, it's
like,
a good community.
Yeah,
like I'd pay good money just for the community, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously it's a positive thing.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I feel like if you could translate, like Michael, for example, like he's seen as one of the good guys. If you can translate his overall persona into a group, Peachy would be it, because I haven't seen them get into any beef, to be honest.
Yeah, no, Michael's a good guy. Michael's a very nice guy, and I think I've never been in Peachy, to be honest, but I've only heard good things, and the fact that they've been around for months now and you've not heard a single bad thing about them, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of groups, so there has been. I know I mentioned EU groups earlier, but there were claims that EasyCop EU steal monitors or something along those lines. I'm not sure how much sort of evidence there is behind that to support it. I haven't seen any personally, but I have been told that they do, and I don't know. I don't particularly know much about the group. I think it's an Italian group, right?
Yeah, it is.
I think so.
EasyCop. I mean, they're quite notorious for their off-white monitor, which is apparently like stupidly good. It's custom built and whatnot. But I don't know. I don't particularly care. But just thought I'd put it out there because I was told it this week.
Yeah.
Stealing monitors is just like, obviously there's going to be a delay because you're taking it from someone else, unless you're taking it right from the source. But usually they're just taking it from another group, so there's going to be a delay. So that already puts you at a disadvantage. And then since you're taking something from another group, a customized message, you know that there's the risk of them, because you've seen all over the place, like when Express did a thing to AM, they're like, if you're seeing this, like, you stole our monitors, like, that's a huge risk to take if that's the way that you're stealing the monitors. So it just seems like a poor thing to do. If you do have the opportunity to purchase the same monitor for, you know, a couple $100 a month, I don't see why you wouldn't just do that while risking your whole reputation, just on stealing some monitors.
Well, you know, on the topic of stealing, I figure we should bring this up. Flare possibly stealing the API from Gainish.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
To be honest, I was kind of surprised. Like, I was, because obviously EU bots right now are on the rise. Like, that's one of the topics we're going to talk about. But they're really up there, because I remember when Ganesh first gained his popularity, I was like, okay, this is like a game changer. And then Flare came out, and then like Hazer framework, whatever it's called, that came out as well. I was just like, all these bots are doing well, but is there a correlation? And obviously, people are apparently saying that Flare's still in the API, which to be honest, I could see that coming, because it was weird to see all the bots do well. Usually, you see one bot dominating and the rest behind.
Yeah, and that kind of. That can kind of take you back to like Phasma. Like, I think Chegg talked about this last week in last week's episode, how the source code was just posted on GitHub and literally anyone could just take it. So, like, you know, who knows? Like, I'm sure all these bots have very similar components if they're running on the same sites. Like, they can only be so different because, you know, they're fighting, I'm sure they're fighting some form of anti-bot, but it's nothing near what Shopify is. So I'm sure and if they're all having this great success, I'm sure it's a much more, you know, point A to point B strategy, and I'm sure that there's a lot of similarity.
The main battle in EU sites is the queue, basically. Like, if you can get past that foot patrol queue, which is notoriously bad, like you can literally be there for like 8 hours, and like the product will literally be out of stock for like 6 hours, and you'll still be in the queue. It's just ridiculous. But if you can get past that queue, then that will literally kill the game for you. But yeah, you're right. Like, all these EU bots just popped up within literally like 2-3 months or something. And it's pretty crazy how well they're all doing. Obviously, Sneaky Cops is like the oldest of all these bots. Performing okay, it's doing alright, it still hits for some people. I can't get it to hit for me for some reason. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know it might be my proxies. I have no idea. I've never hit with Sneaky Copter, and I've had it for like 6 months. But still, it's there's obviously different bots out there which are sort of doing different things right now. I've actually heard that another bot has taken an API from Hawk, but I don't sort of want to delve into that because I don't know how sensitive the information is. But I just found that interesting. But Hawk's obviously killing it, Ganesh is killing it. Kaiser, actually I spoke to Kaiser earlier, he said he might might be down for an episode at some point in the future.
Mm.
But yeah, Kai's obviously killed it as well this week with Foot Locker, I think.
Yeah.
I was actually gutted I couldn't get a copy. I think that when they dropped the copies for the beta members, I was actually editing episode 1 of the podcast, so I just was not being able to copy it.
I was there. It was.
Oh, really?
It was pretty unorganized, to be honest.
What, the drop?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I don't know, but the bot cooked. Yeah, that's fair enough. The Discord when I was in there, it wasn't very organized. But if the bot's cooking, the bot's cooking, then
Yeah, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and should bot devs be accountable? Okay, I think we've pretty much
Covered all the
I
topics.
think
Yeah.
we covered all of it.
everything.
Yeah, I think unless there's anything else you guys particularly fancy bringing up, or if anything we've missed, do you feel?
I think we
Yeah.
Yeah.
give a good viewpoint.
Yeah, perfect. All right, fantastic. So we'll probably conclude this episode at this point. Then I have no idea how long this recording's been going on for. People watching on YouTube, we've just launched on Spotify. I'll put the link in the description. People watching on Spotify or listening on Spotify, obviously you've got YouTube. If you fancy it, I don't know. I'll prefer to listen on Spotify. You can listen to it on your phone or at the gym or whatever. I don't know. But yeah. Anyways, BalkoGen discount will be in the description and will be tweeted out. If you're interested in joining the podcast for a future episode, please drop me a DM on my personal Twitter at Syed or to the podcast Twitter. Thank you again to Bape Drop, to Qasim and North for joining us for this week, and we'll see you next week hopefully.